being as the subject is how many bass are out there, I figured we'd have a few folks manage through the weather and get here, since we do that when we fish anyway. Before we get started, I'd like to ask Kelly Stevens to come up and lead us in prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance.
Would bow your heads, please. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the blessings that you have granted us this day, and indeed the blessings that you have granted us every day of our lives. We thank you for this great country of ours and the abundant resources with which you've blessed us. We ask you, Lord, that to allow us and guide us to be good stewards of those resources. And Lord, also, we thank you for the personnel in our armed forces and all of our first responders who protect us day and night. And Lord, finally, we ask that you protect everyone here on their trips home, grant them safe travel. In the Lord's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Kelly. I want to thank again Matt and his team for being here, and I'll turn it over to Matt.
Okay. All right, I think I'll just walk around, and is that loud enough? Okay. It's good to be here. Thanks, Dave, for inviting me back up. So as Dave said, I'm leading this Neely Henry Bass project. I work at Auburn, and so part of my job is to do research. And so we're doing this project, this research project, and it's funded by ADC and our Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, the wildlife and freshwater side. They do the inland reservoirs, and I think many of you know Mike Holly here, so we're working closely on the project. And so I just wanted to give you an update. So I see some familiar faces, so I think a lot of you were here last time around. And so I'm just going to talk about what we found. So the last time I was here, I told you generally what we were trying to do, and we had just put the tags out. Or I think you guys may have even been kind of still putting the last few tags out, so all the tags weren't even out. And so we really didn't have tag returns from the anglers back. So, but now we do. We have a year of tag returns in the study, so we can look at some of the results. So that's what we're going to do. They're going to be showing you the results. I'm going to just kind of talk overall about what we're doing, and then I'll turn it loose and let those guys finish it off. Okay, so some of these slides are the same as last time. I just want to kind of remind you, if you're here last time, if you weren't, just to tell you what we're doing. So Neely Henry Lake is important to all of us, and you folks live on the lake. It's very important to you. It's important to a lot of people for angling, and the quality of that angling is important. And so what's involved in quality angling? People want to catch large fish, and they also want to catch a decent number of fish, some combination of that. And it's different for different people, but I think we can all agree that those are generally positive attributes of a fishery. And the fisheries also can have a positive economic impact. When people come to the lake, spend money to fish, stay in a hotel, get gas, get some food, and all that sort of stuff. We wouldn't be doing the project if the bass fishing in Neely Henry was tops in the state. It's a great bass lake, and we all want it to be as best as it can be. But the numbers of big fish are probably not what people would like to see, and the catch rates are down. So we want to come in here with the study and try to get at what's going on with fishing quality. And so one of the things that can affect fishing, a few things that can affect fishing quality, fishing pressure, so the amount of angling effort on the lake, because that leads to fish mortality, which affects the abundance of fish. And so we want to look into that. Is there a problem with too much harvest? Is there too much catch and release mortality? So a lot of folks these days throw their bass back and just fish catch and release and fish for fun. So, but some fraction of those bass, due to handling mortality, will die. And so that would be a source of mortality. There's some other things that could be going on. What about natural mortality? For a fish like bass, sort of the natural state of a bass population is, about 30% of them just die from one year to the next, having nothing to do with fishing, just that's the natural condition if you're a bass, disease and all sorts of other things. So we want to look at the potential for that, and there's a bass virus that has been a problem in the state before, and so we're going to look at that a little bit to see if that could be potentially a problem. And then fish growth rates could be another, and that could be just natural genetics. So we want to look at some of these things. Okay, so the things we're going to be looking at, and I've alluded to this, look at the impacts of angling on these bass populations and try to get an idea of just what fraction of the fish are caught and what fraction might be dying due to catch and release mortality or harvest or anything else. We're going to do some age and growth. We're going to do some age and growth work to see, are these fish growing like we would expect for a lake like Neely Henry? I mentioned the economic importance, so we're also going to look at, there's trade-offs with, if you have a lot of people coming to the lake, that's good, they're spending money in the local area, but that's more fishing pressure on the lake, which could ultimately have a negative effect on the populations and the quality of the fishing. So we want to look at that. And then I said we're doing this bass virus testing, and we're looking at some genetics. We're taking some genetic samples. I'm not going to talk about these. We're still working up these samples, so we don't really have any firm results tonight. I'm going to focus on this stuff here. And these folks are going to give you an idea of, first of all, what are we seeing so far with the tagging that we've done, and then you may have already seen, or you're probably going to be seeing my crew up here on the water at the boat ramp. And so just to give you an idea of what we're doing when you see us out there. All right, the crew. No, not the crew. The fish. We're talking about largemouth and spotted bass. And this is actually, we'll probably call it Alabama bass in the talks. It's actually its own species. We have our own bass species, and so Alabama bass, but it's basically a spotted bass. So those are the critters. And then you've already met the other critters, the grad students, Natalie, there's Max with a peacock bass, TJ, and Sam. Now Sam's not here. She's working on 2 different projects. Her main project is she's working on amberjack down in the Gulf of Mexico, tagging project. And so, but if you call a tag in, if you catch one of our tag fish and call, you may talk to one of these folks, or you may get Sam on the phone. So I just have her up there. And then Marcus is the other crew. We just brought him in on the project. He couldn't make it tonight. He's feeling a little under the weather. That's not Marcus. That's where he went to school for his undergrad. Okay, so what are we doing on the water? We're tagging fish. We're putting an external tag, and Max will show you some pictures, in the fish that you can see hanging out of the back of the fish. They're yellow, they're bright. And so we're putting those out there and then seeing how many get caught. And then radio tags. Max and the crew are tracking. The radio tag sends out a signal, and you can, with a radio antenna, hear the signal and track the fish around. And they're going to collect fish, age and growth. TJ, you'll see him out there collecting fish to pull out ear bones to age the fish. He'll talk about how that works. And then the angler surveys. Natalie's going to be doing some surveying at the boat ramps and on the water to get at some of the, I mentioned the economic and the trade-offs with fishing quality, and look at some of that stuff.
All right, so I'm Max Rubino. I'll be talking about some of the stuff I'm doing on the lake, specifically with the tagging study and then some mortality stuff of our bass species on the lake. Matt touched on this. I'll go in a little bit more. I'm not going to explain where Neely Henry is. I assume that you guys all know that. But it's a high effort bass fishery. I mean, it brings people in from throughout the state and neighboring states. And the quality of fishing is really important, not only for our local anglers or anglers that come from far away to fish for tournaments. There's some social value in that, of being able to catch, have good quality fishing, but also just in terms of economics. I mean, bringing anglers in brings money to the reservoir and the surrounding counties that probably wouldn't exist without it. 2019 study found that there's at least 143 yearly angler tournaments on the reservoir, bringing in more than $8 million in economic impact. I mean, that's a lot of money. And you know, while Neely Henry still is attractive and draws in anglers, there has been a perceived decrease in angling quality on the reservoir. I don't think I've talked to one angler, whether local, non-tournament, tournament, that tells me the fishing's anywhere near as good as it used to be 10 years ago. And we really want to know why. And one possible reason why could be because of angling-associated mortality. And angling leads to fish mortality in a couple of different ways, the most obvious being harvest. If you take a fish home, fillet it, eat it, that fish is dead. It's pretty obvious. Perhaps a little more discreet is this catch and release mortality. So when you let a fish go, and even if you handle it really well, there is some probability that fish dies as a result of being handled. And that's okay, that's to be expected. It's not to say that fishing's a bad thing. So one thing that we're looking at is post-release mortality of fish that have been caught in tournaments and comparing that to the post-release non-tournament mortality. So comparing mortality of fish that are caught in tournaments and caught in non-tournaments. And the big question is this a big deal on Neely Henry? Could this cause the observed decrease in angling quality? And one way to do that is to do a tagging study. And so what you do is you have these high-value external dart tags. Ours are worth anywhere from $100 to $300. And because of that monetary reward, when someone catches a tagged fish, they're pretty likely to call me. And that gives me an idea of whether or not a fish was caught or not. And the other thing is I have these radio tags out there. And these radio tags, we'll get into this a little bit more in detail later, but they let us know if a fish is alive or dead. So I know if the fish is caught from the dart tag. I know if it's dead from the radio tag. So what we're doing with these tags, so we're going to estimate the number of fish that are caught and die from tournament and non-tournament angling as well as harvest, and figure out how many fish die just because, due to natural mortality. We'll also estimate the different sizes of fish being caught, see if maybe bigger fish are being caught, and maybe that's hurting the population. And then we'll also compare between the species in the lake, the Alabama spotted bass and largemouth bass. How we're doing this is we do shoreline electrofishing. So you might have seen us out there earlier this year. We also did some tagging at the end of 2021, early 2022, using an electrofishing boat. It has these two things that stick out of it. It looks really weird, and it brings up fish for a couple seconds. We grab them and we tag them. So we tagged 795 fish in our first year of tagging with a high-value external dart tag. In this last tagging season that we just finished up this January, we tagged 801 additional fish. So we have nearly 1,600 fish out there with a high-value external dart tag. All these tags carry a reward somewhere between $100 and $300, and 1/3 of the fish, so every third fish, we gave a second external dart tag. That gives us an idea if an angler calls me and says, hey, I caught a tagged fish, it's got one tag in it, but I know that I tagged that fish with 2 tags. It gives me an idea of how often fish lose their tags, so we can get an idea of how many fish are swimming around out there without a tag. The other thing we have is this radio telemetry component. So we tag 125 fish of each species, so 250 fish total with a radio transmitter. We tag 50 of each species in our first year, 75 of each species in our second year. And these tags, it's really cool. They have a accelerometer that monitors fish movement. So if a fish doesn't move for a period of time, for us it's 24 hours, they send a separate signal that says, hey, this fish is dead. So you might see us out there, with an antenna looking around, kind of look pretty goofy. That's us seeing if the fish are alive or dead. So that's what we're doing. So we got some big fish when we were doing this. The biggest fish that we tagged was just shy of 2 feet. A really nice fish. We didn't weigh it, but it was a seriously large fish. We got lots of fish above 5 pounds, and the overall size of fish that we tagged, it looked pretty good. It looks like there's some good-sized largemouth and some good-sized spots out there. So some of you guys probably fish the lake, so we're going to go through what you do if you catch a tagged fish. So the first thing you do is you cut the tags as close to the fish as possible. So you don't pull them out, just cut them as close as you can. The wound will heal over. And then some people ask, if the fish has 2 tags, should I cut one and leave another one so that someone else can catch it? We really want you to cut both the tags if you catch a tagged fish. And then people also ask me, like, hey, I caught this tagged fish. Do I have to let it go because it's tagged? Or do I have to keep it because it's tagged? And it doesn't matter. Do whatever with the fish that you're going to do regardless of his tag. So if you're planning on keeping that fish before you saw it was tagged, keep it. If you're planning on letting it go, let it go. And then you might notice that your fish may have some weird, wire sticking out of it. And what that is it's the radio transmitter. And if you're going to release that tagged fish with the radio transmitter, I ask that you don't cut it, because if you cut that transmitter, we lose the data on that fish forever, and then it's kind of useless. However, if you do decide to keep that fish, it's fine to eat, even with the radio transmitter in it, it's fine. But I just ask that you mail that tag back to me, because they're kind of expensive and we can reuse them for other things, try to be efficient. Then the next thing you gotta do is call me. So we have our phone number on the tag, signs, and online. I've got the phone in my pocket right now. Somebody is on this phone from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week. So if you call it, someone's gonna answer it. Every once in a while, I or someone else might be in class or something. We might miss it, but we'll get back to you really quickly. And then when you call that number, you can call up with a tag return or any questions you have about the project. That's the best way to get a hold of us. So you're wondering what we're doing, or you have some questions about what we're doing, you can call us at that number. As I'll mention later, when you catch tagged fish, you have to register as a vendor. You can also get help from us when you call us. And then we also have an email, and that email is monitored continuously. So throughout the day, I'm checking that, someone else is checking it. So if you want to email us, if you're more comfortable doing that, you're welcome to do that as well. And then when you call, we're going to ask you some questions. So we're going to want to know the tag number of the fish. That lets us know what fish you caught. Then also the date, time, and location of catch. So we don't need to know exactly that long where you're at on the planet, but catch tagged fish, maybe take an extra second to look around, see where you're at, give us an idea where you caught it. If you don't do that, it's fine. We're still going to pay you either way, but if you can get an idea of where you're at, it helps us out a little bit, especially if it's radio tagged. I know about where you let that fish go if you let it go. We'll also see what angling sector you're in. So if you're fishing in a non-tournament, or if you're fishing a tournament, whether or not you released or harvested that fish, and if that fish got weighed in at a tournament, put in the live well and released, or if you let it go right away. So the most important part is, how do you get paid? So in order to get paid, you have to call us. If you don't call me with your tags, I can't do anything with it. The other thing is you have to mail in that tag, so you got to make sure that you clip it off. And the third part is you have to do your vendor registration. And vendor registration is a requirement from Auburn University to meet financial reporting obligations, the IRS. Basically, it's making sure that these government funds are going to the right places, and that I'm not using it to pay my buddies or something like that. That's why it exists. But it's kind of a difficult process. The website is pretty confusing, and we understand that, and it certainly makes my job more difficult too. We have the step-by-step guide that we send to everybody. It tells you exactly what buttons to press, how to get paid by check, direct deposit, if you want to mail in your stuff. It tells you how to do all that. And then the other thing is just call us. We don't want people spending hours on this thing. It should be 15, 20 minutes to do this thing. So if you're struggling with it, just give us a call. I'm happy to sit down and walk you through it, or do whatever we need to do to get you paid. We really want to pay these out. I also get some calls from people. They say, hey, I caught this tag fish 8 months ago. I was really busy, or I was sick. I never got to calling it in. Can I still get paid? And the answer is absolutely. If you have a tag sitting around that you haven't called in, it's okay. We're not going to give you a hard time for not calling it in. Just call it in. We'll get you set up, get you paid. It's all fine. And the other thing is this study, it really relies on angler participation. So if you catch a tag fish and you don't cut the tag, or and just let it go, or if you cut the tag and you never call us, we can't do the study. So it's really important to us that you call on the tags if you get one, and we really appreciate everyone's cooperation. So I'm going to go over some of our data that we're getting from these tag fish. And so what we have here is the numbers of fish. Can everyone see this? Am I standing in anyone's way? Yeah. Okay. I'll go over here. Okay, so here we have the numbers of fish tagged and numbers of fish caught by anglers. So number is over here, that's pretty pooled across all sizes over here on the right. And we also have the exact same thing for Alabama bass. Same deal, lighter colors, that's the number of fish tagged, darker colors, numbers of fish caught. And what you can look at here is this curve of fish caught roughly matches the curve of fish tagged. And what that indicates is that anglers aren't catching more bigger or smaller fish. The tags we put out, we get those out back in the same proportion. Another thing we want to look at is the number of fish caught by month. So here we have our number of largemouth bass and what months they were caught in. As you can see, January is not really fair because we were still tagging fish into February. But after that, we kind of have a linear increase in number of fish caught until about June. And then we have a sharp decrease in July, and then it's pretty low throughout the summer, then into the winter months. Some reasons we think that might be is just, I just moved here from Montana. Alabama is hot in the summer, and the fish feel it too. So I was not prepared for my first Alabama summer. So, sometimes that can just throw the fish off. And then once you get in those August months, there's also just less people fishing. I can't tell you exactly why, but that's something that possibly could be why the catch rates are dipping in those summer months. And here for Alabama bass, we have kind of the same thing. However, we have this huge peak in April. I don't know what's going on there, but if you're a spotted bass fisherman and you want to catch them, April is the time to go, because we got crazy tag returns in April. And then we see this decline and then kind of low tag returns throughout the summer and then into the winter. Another thing we want to look at is seeing our anglers catching more of one species than the other. Do they prefer spots? Do they prefer largemouth? Or just by happenstance are they catching more? So here we have the percentage of tag fish captured by all anglers. Percent is over here, and then the total length is over here. And then on the right, again, it's just pooled, all those numbers add together. The green color, that's largemouth. This orange color, that's spotted bass. These tiny numbers, all that is, that's just the number of fish of that size that we tag. So for example, we tag 98, 300 to 350 millimeter largemouth bass. And then these bars here, that just represents the variation in our estimate. This kind of gives you an idea of how confident we are that that's the true value. So the more bigger sample size you have, the more confident that you can be that that's true. And as you can see, across all sizes, we have had more spotted bass caught and in total, indicating some angler selectivity towards spotted bass. That could be that there's more spotted bass in the lake. It could be that anglers like catching spots more. It could be that spots are more aggressive and they're more likely to take a bait. I don't know, but we're getting more returns from those spotted bass. Another thing we want to look at is in tournaments. So we want to know, are anglers in tournaments, are they catching all the big fish, and are they catching more of one species than the other? And we really aren't seeing any size selectivity towards larger fish in tournaments. And we're not seeing any species selectivity either, because you see largemouth and Alabama bass, they're about the same. This was surprising to me. I expected to see tournament angler selectivity that they'd catch more largemouth bass, because a largemouth bass will weigh more than Alabama bass of the same length. But we're not seeing this. Maybe this means that tournament anglers are just getting what they can get. I'm not exactly sure, but we're not seeing any size or species selectivity in tournaments. Another thing we want to do is, if a fish gets captured, what happens to it? So if someone catches a fish, what do they do with it? And so they can either release a fish in a non-tournament, they can harvest that fish in a non-tournament, they can catch it in a tournament and release it, or they can catch it during the pre-fishing period for a tournament and release it. And the main takeaway from here, we have the percentage or proportion of the fish that we tagged, what happened to them, is almost all the fish in this reservoir get released. And it's about 50-50. We get just about as much fish caught in tournaments than non-tournaments. But as you can see, harvest is way down here. Harvest rate in this lake for largemouth bass is less than 1%. For spots, it's less than 2.5%. So harvest isn't something that we're really concerned about in this system. This is something we expected, but it's kind of crazy to see just how low these estimates are. Another thing we will do is, as I mentioned, we have those $100, $200, and $300 tags. That's not just for fun. The reason we do that is get an idea of how many people, when they catch that $100 fish, say, maybe I'm rich or something. I don't want $100. That's not enough money for me. But most people are going to call in that $300 tag. So basically what this graph shows us is that as the reward level goes up, the percentage of tag returns goes up, giving an idea that the more money you make a tag worth, the more likely that someone's going to call a tag fish in. I mean, it's not exactly rocket science, but it makes sense. But we can quantify it, which is nice. Another thing we want to do is look at tag loss. So I get this question sometimes. What if a fish loses a tag? Is that going to mess your catch rates? And we actually account for that with those double tag fish. So if someone calls me, like I said, says I caught a fish that had one tag. I know it had two tags. I know that fish lost a tag. So of our double tag fish, 94 of those were caught, 85 had retained both tags at the time of capture. So we did a pretty good job. And then we can back out a tag loss rate of a single tag fish losing one tag. And we do that, it's about 0.05, so 5%, which is really low, but we can quantify it, which is good, because eventually we throw all this stuff into a computer model, and that helps to sort out some of the variation, give us a more accurate estimate. And then the last thing I'm going to go over is our estimated mortality rates. This is what I really care about, how are fish dying? And so here we have the rate, so that's a proportion out of 1. And then we have fish that die because of natural mortality. This is the monthly estimate, so how many fish are dying every month due to natural mortality, post-release non-tournament, and post-release tournament mortality. And as you can see, natural mortality is about 8% for largemouth and 7% for Alabama bass every month. For non-tournament fish, it's about 12% for largemouth bass and 11% for Alabama bass. And then quite a bit higher over here, it's 22% for largemouth bass and about 32% for spotted bass. So maybe we have more fish dying in tournaments. However, the variation in these are quite large. This is another reason why getting those angler tag returns is really essential, because we can get a more accurate estimate. So this hints at that maybe tournament mortality is higher, and it's higher in spots, but the magnitude we can't really say until we get more data. And we'll get that from our radio tag fish that we have out this year, and then also from more people with our new, we'll get more angler tag returns this year from the fish we just tagged. So overall, in our year one summary, our overall percentage of fish captured is high. About half the spots in the lake get caught every year, which is pretty, substantial. That's a lot of fish being caught. And then about a third of the largemouth bass, which is more consistent with other large bass reservoirs in Alabama. We have similar capture percentage across fish size, just saying, we're not really seeing angler selectivity towards larger fish or smaller fish. I know all us anglers who want to catch the larger fish, but that doesn't mean that we necessarily catch them, and that overall Alabama bass are getting caught more often. Our post-release mortality, so the fish that are caught in tournaments, might be higher than the fish that are caught in non-tournaments, and then it also is probably higher for Alabama bass. Harvest is really low in this system, like I said, less than 2.5% for largemouth bass, or for less than 2.5% for Alabama bass, less than 1% for largemouth, suggesting that catch and release mortality exceeds harvest, but the magnitude we're not really sure yet. We need more data from our year two fish. And then both our estimates, they're consistent with other reservoirs in Alabama and throughout the Southeast. I'd like to acknowledge our funding source is Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, Neely Henry residents and anglers. They have been very supportive of us, and also other graduate students and technicians at Auburn University that have helped in my field work. I will gladly answer any questions that you may have. If you want to write down this information in case you have questions later that you didn't think of, feel free to give the tag phone a call, or you can also send me an email. My email is up there, and I check my email and I respond to emails. So if you email me, I will email you back.
All right, howdy everybody. I'm TJ Pullen. So what I'm kind of do is I'm just going to give you a little bit on what I'm doing. So Max is kind of the person who collects all this information. I kind of take the information that Max collects and say, okay, so we have all this information, so what is this doing to the lake? Well, okay, so the overall goal is to see what's happening in the lake, is what kind of impact is the fishing, catch and release, or tournament having in the lake. And one of the potential things that we're thinking about, like we've kind of discussed here briefly, is that angling mortality is picking these fish off. One thing in specifically that I'm looking at is the growth rate of these fish. So not all fish are the same. Some fish grow at faster rates than others. So if all of these fast-growing fish get to the certain size where they can be caught earlier than the slower-growing fish, and there's enough mortality rate associated with that of those fish being caught, then these faster-growing fish are dying sooner. And if those fish are if this happens as a pattern over and over again, it's picking out these faster growing fish, leaving a population of slow growing fish that don't get as big as faster growing fish. And so with, wrong one. And so with that, the two things that we want to answer, two questions that we want to answer to really get at this is how much do these growth trajectories vary? And we do that by collecting age and growth data, and then exactly what sizes of fish are being captured. And I'll tell you a little bit about how we're doing that here in a minute. So if any of y'all have fish tournaments, you may have seen me there, or you will see me there if you do. Fish tournaments this coming year, I'm collecting fish from tournaments this year as well. Any of y'all that do fish tournaments, if you see me up there, please come and talk to me. Love to talk to you. We really appreciate all the anglers who work with us and let us collect fish and measure fish from them, because without them and without the tournament directors, this wouldn't be possible. because I call tournament directors. I get in contact with them either by Googling their tournaments or on Facebook or however, and I get permission from tournament directors to attend the tournament. And then once I'm there, I collect 10 largemouth and 10 Alabama bass per tournament to keep and collect length, weight, age, and sex. And we'll get into a little bit of that here in a minute. And then outside of those 20 fish that I collect and age, I measure and release up to 50 additional fish to get a more representative sample of what sizes of fish are being weighed in at tournaments. And then the other way that we're getting age and growth collections is from like we discussed a minute ago, from electrofishing. And we do that annually in the spring, and we'll do that this coming up in April. Okay, so the fish that I keep from tournaments, I collect what's called an otolith, and it's basically an ear bone. It sits kind of where you would expect an ear to be if bass had one, and it looks like that. It's just a little bone's not much bigger than your fingernail, or not much bigger. It is smaller than your fingernail. And then what I do is I take those out of the fish, I mount them in epoxy, and then I put them in a very expensive saw, and I cut a sliver out of the middle, and I mount it onto a microscope slide, and then under a microscope I can look at it like this and count the rings, just like a tree, and you can see how old that fish is. So eventually, we don't have this data right now because I have way too many fish to age and way too little time, but eventually we will get there. So eventually, we will be able to use a computer software program and measure the distance between these rings based on the age and the size of the fish. We can tell how fast it was growing. Okay, so and the way that we're getting it, kind of like what size of fish are being captured outside of tournaments. Another way you may see me or Natalie doing surveys is we're going to hand out these cards. I'll blow it up here in just a second. To anglers. We want to hand these out per season to anglers, and we want to have them participate with us and take pictures of their catch, just like you can see here, laying next to that ruler. We know the known length of that ruler, and so using a computer software program again, we can use that card for reference and know exactly how big that fish is. And when anglers email in pictures of their fish, we want them to answer the questions printed on the cards: when and where was the fish caught? Did they harvest it? Did they weigh it in a tournament? Did it bounce around their live well for a while, and then did they release it? Or did they just catch it and release it immediately? Or take the picture and then release it immediately? And then if they were fishing in a tournament or not. So I just want to get in a little bit of what I've seen at tournaments from getting lengths and ages of fish. We don't have all the age data, like I said, but hopefully, maybe if we can do this again, I'll have all that for y'all. So kind of what I'm seeing, this is all lengths of fish that I've measured, whether I measured and released them or collected them to age. The black bars are largemouth, and the orange bars are Alabama bass. And a little bit contrary to what Max was saying is there's definitely more largemouth bass being weighed in at tournaments, like I suspect just because they're a little bit bigger at the same size as as Alabama bass. Yeah, thanks. But it's mostly the smaller ones. As you get above about 400 millimeters or so, it's all about the same, and it doesn't really differ any. One thing, go ahead.
For us non-metric inclined people.
Oh, yeah, sorry, okay. I got you. So 300 millimeters is right at 12 inches. So 12 inches is 305 millimeters. 350 is about, that's 15 inches, I believe. And so 400, that is about
125 millimeters is an inch. So
Yeah.
starting at 300 is 12, 13, 14, 15, 16.
So yeah, about
500, that's your 20 inches. That's all.
right.
Thank you.
So, and one thing you'll notice is I didn't collect many fish in this bigger size range. One, yes, they are less abundant. You don't see them as often. But two, I'm working voluntarily with these anglers, getting fish from them, and sometimes they don't want me to touch their fish, which that's fine. So there's a little bit skewed here in the larger size class, but most anglers have been pretty helpful. And then another thing that we do is we take all of this data and we put it into a simulation model like Max has talked about. And through all of our parameters, I won't get all into that, but we are seeing, as anglers expressed to us, a decline in fishing quality. And through all the parameters, given the mortality and all that stuff, we predict that because of estimating that 50% of the bass population is caught each year, that it's causing about an 8% decline in basically fish that are about 300 millimeters plus.
Thanks, TJ. I appreciate it. Hi, you guys. I'm Natalie Coash. I am handling more of the economic side of this. I'm crunching the numbers over here. And we're gonna go across how fishing quality can be affected by your tournament angling and the trade-offs of how much money that brings to your economy and what that can do for the fishery, as well as some information that we're going to be collecting this year and why that's important and useful. So tournaments obviously they make a lot of money for you guys' economy. Tournament fishing expenditures generate a lot of local and state tax revenue. I know many of you guys are residents here and either have businesses here and or also spend your money in the local economy. And just like any other business, recreational activity is brings tax money and expenditures to your local economy. So just like any of those things, tournaments especially bring in large amounts of revenue to your local economy that otherwise wouldn't exist without tournaments. Recreational fishing brings in money as well to your community, but there's been a lot of studies that show that tournament anglers spend a higher amount of money in the area surrounding a reservoir than non-tournament bass anglers. And when we're talking about expenditures here, I'm talking about your boat and your vehicle gas, your food, your lodging, your hotels. When it's a Saturday and boats are everywhere around town, that's a lot of money going to you guys. And that's really important. Let's see. Unfortunately, we have to balance that. And like Max has alluded in things, is tournaments have a higher post-release mortality than non-tournament angling. And excessive catch and release angling can result in decreased fishing quality. There also tends to be some recreational access and boat ramp crowding that a lot of people and different stakeholders can have issues with if they're trying to use the lake for different things. So my job here is to find that balance. Where is there enough recreational opportunities to make you guys happy, but not too many for the sake of fishing quality? We're going to try and find that balance in this project. And so my job here at Auburn University is to crunch some numbers, and I'm going to run this big model and things, and that's going to help me run the trade-offs between your fishing quality and the kind of experience that you guys can have, as well as the amount of tournament opportunities as well as recreational, seeing how many tournaments and recreational opportunities your fishery can sustain, and in turn how much money that generates for your economy. And that'll be going behind the scenes with me crunching those numbers. But a big part of that is we don't exactly know how tournament and non-tournament angler effort affect each other. So we need to know how tournament anglers are going to respond if the fishing quality gets better, or if it gets worse, or if there are more or less tournaments being held at your lake. Because that's going to affect the effort that is affecting their research, as well as the money that's going to circulate through your economy. And so in bad situations or different things, if the fishing quality gets worse, there's going to be where are the anglers going to go? Are recreational anglers going to fish more? Are there going to be more tournaments, less? Where are you guys going to go with your effort and expenditures? So this is where you guys are going to come in this year, and we need to know what you guys are going to be doing. And so this year we're going to use an angler interest survey to hopefully better understand your guys' angler dynamic at the lake and answer a lot of these questions that are going to help us, that are going to help me more precisely analyze your fishery for Neely Henry. So this survey this year, we're going to go out between spring, summer, and fall, me and some of our other crew and everything, and you'll see me at tournaments and non-tournaments, whether on the water intercepting you guys and seeing how your day is going and how the fishing is going, or as well as at the weigh-in with TJ or different things like that. So this survey should take less than 10 minutes. I don't want to take any more of your time than you want me to take your fishing time. Absolutely. And so some of these questions I'm going to come up and ask you guys is origin, how far are you guys coming to fish here, as well as trip frequency. How many days do you fish every month, and how many of those are tournament or recreational? We're going to look at questions such as, how much money did it cost you to participate in this tournament today, as well as, or how much money did it cost you to just recreational fish, as well as what would you guys do in scenarios where there were more tournaments being provided at Neely Henry or less tournaments being provided? What would you do with your angler effort on a Saturday afternoon if you caught 5 fish instead of 2 fish, or if you caught 2 fish instead of your normal 5? And so all of those estimates are going to affect the way I analyze your data and see. It's going to allow us to assess the fishery and the economic trade-offs of how we want to manage Neely Henry. And so our next steps are to implement this survey this summer, and you'll see me in the spring, summer, and fall. And our next steps are to implement that, and that will help us round out this this large project and all this effort that we're going to hopefully provide Neely Henry with some information that they can use for management in the future. So if you see us out there, we're happy to talk to you and give you the rundown of what's going on and everything. And we absolutely would love to say thank you for you guys helping us with this project so we can help you. Absolutely. So I'd like to thank ADC and the Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, as well as everyone that's helped us with this project. And I think we're going to open it up for questions for you guys now. No? Anyone? Yeah. I'm going to try and do a representative sample of a lot of them. So I'm going to go to your small locals tournaments as well as big ones on the weekend. And we're going to do a little bit of small, medium, and large, as well as through the spring, summer, and fall. So we're going to try and get as best of a representative sample as possible, because tournament anglers from different areas or tournament anglers from different days are different. And someone might spend more money, someone might spend less and stuff, and all of that is going to come together to give me an average of what kind of money is circulating through your economy.
As I mentioned, we've got a number of projects. We've got the fish habitat coming up. I've also got a sign-up sheet on the tables on the left. Some of you at the last meeting, we're going to be partnering with the Etowah County Extension Department to be trained to do water testing. If any of y'all want to participate in that, you don't have to be as smart as Gene to do it. That's what he told me, so I'm going to participate myself. But there'll be a training session put together. If you're interested, please put your name and phone number back there, and we'll contact you to participate in that. It sounds like a really fun opportunity. We've got our media all squared away. We did some transition back toward the end of last year. If you go to our website, you'll see that it's different. It's a lot more interactive. Danny manages in our Facebook page. If you do Facebook, please go on there and like us and share the information with your neighbors, friends, and families, and that sort of thing. Well, let's just say, for instance, that the data says it would help this lake to be stocked. Then the Lake Association would take the lead to work with the appropriate entities to see about getting us stocking on the lake. I mean, that can be done. But first, we've got to have the facts.
Thank you to our sponsors.
Join us. NeelyHenryLake.org
Thank you to our sponsors.